Architectural Outcast.
Welcome to the Architectural Outcast. I'm Randy, and today we're going on a grand tour of the architecture of Cyrodiil. No one plays, well, let me rephrase that. I have never played a Bethesda game for their complex characters and groundbreaking story. It's always about exploring their amazing worlds. And one of the reasons why their worlds are so amazing, they get the architecture right, mostly. One of the reasons why architecture is so important and why it can make or break your world building is that we all live in and encounter the built world on a daily basis. We know it like the back of our hands. Not everybody may have the specialized language, be able to articulate what they know, but they know it nonetheless. If you get the architecture wrong, you can kiss your world building, the audience's ability to suspend their disbelief, goodbye. Now, it has to be acknowledged that video games have their own unique challenges when it comes to world building. Developers have to balance believable architecture with gameplay mechanics, and whatever limitations the current technology imposes, they have to make compromises. But the fewer compromises they make with believable architecture, the more believable the world will be. We're going to start our tour of Cyrodiil with the Imperial City, and like its name implies, it's the capital. Imperial City is an artificial pre-planned city. It has a rational design, a circle. Each district of the city is a piece of the pie, all focused on the Imperial Palace at the center. The symbolism there is pretty obvious. Ancient Greece, ancient Rome, and ancient China, all famous for their pre-planned geometric cities. The Italian Renaissance, they love their circular and star-shaped cities. Modern examples, Washington, D.C., Ottawa, and Brasilia, pre-planned capitals. The city's located on an island out in the middle of a lake, and the only access in and out of the city is through a fortified causeway. The lake has direct access to the ocean, allowing shipping and its associated trade to come directly to the city. Real-life examples of this are far too numerous to mention. Approaching Imperial City's causeway and main gate, we find a little settlement, an inn on the left and a little cottage on the right. The inn has a stone ground floor, post and beam construction on the rest, and it's all covered in a thatch roof. The building structure and design details are accurate. It's based on real-world examples. This building type is ubiquitous all across Europe, although today we mostly associate it with the Tudor period in England. This building is also symbolic of a major problem with Oblivion's world building, a philosophical and aesthetic choice that the developers made. This building is supposed to be an inn right outside the front gate of the Imperial City. It would be incredibly prosperous, where the wealthy and powerful stayed. It would be well maintained, not looking like a rundown dump. You wouldn't have old mildewy thatch that probably leaks. You wouldn't have faded, dry-rotted wood and deteriorating wattle and daub. And you definitely wouldn't have weeds all over the place, particularly on the doorstep. We see the same themes play out with the little cottage across the road. Design-wise, it's great. This type of building is ubiquitous all over Europe, but we mostly associate it with the rural cottages of Ireland. But the developers have used the same design aesthetic. Same wore-out thatch, same rotten wood, and weeds. Weeds everywhere. This isn't how the Middle Ages looked. The developers are carrying on the myth that people in the past lived in a drab, gray, and brown world, and their built environment was full of rot and decay and misery. This couldn't be farther from the truth. People in the past lived in a world of vibrant and bright colors, and there's a reason why these buildings lasted for hundreds of years. They knew how to maintain them. The developers are also carrying on another myth, that in the past, people from rural environments lived in barely habitable hovels, whereas people who lived in the city lived in far superior houses. The reality, more often than not, the people in rural environments lived in just as good, if not better housing than their friends in the city. Frustrating from my perspective, these two myths have been repeated so often, particularly by TV shows, movies, and video games, that most people don't know the truth. So my point is kind of irrelevant. Once you get through the village, you come up to the causeway and the main entrance into the city, and we're back to really good. The first gate is big and impressive, a mixture of Romanesque and Gothic influences. It's the right impression you want to make on somebody coming into the city the first time. You can see the stones, how they're stacked to create the gate. It's believable. You can see how all the details have been carved into the stone. It looks legit. There are many surviving examples of bridges from the Roman Empire that look exactly like this bridge. Center set up for wagons, horse traffic, and the sides for pedestrian traffic. The long exposed bridge is easy to defend from the city. And then you have the symbolism of that second massive gate, and then rising up behind it, the tower of the Imperial Palace and the two smaller towers off to each side. We finally get across the bridge, and this road is not a main road into a capital city. But as we approach the gate, off to the left is a stable, and it's believable. You're going to need a place to put your horse before you go into the city. But again, we're back to that same old problem. This is a rundown, dilapidated shack, complete with holes in the roof. This stable is the reason why I brought up the issues with the inn and the cottage on the other side of the causeway. The developer's choices are turning my irrelevant point into a long-term problem that fundamentally undermines their world building. The players may not realize that the game is perpetuating a myth, but as I said at the beginning of this discussion, they know how the real world works. And something's going to start nagging at the back of their mind as more and more things don't make sense, like this stable. The building itself is fine. It's a type found all over Europe and North America. It's the philosophical and aesthetic choices that make the building an anachronism. Structurally, it makes no sense. Using a bunch of boards to quickly and cheaply knock together a shack is a relatively modern phenomenon. Prior to the Industrial Revolution, boards were difficult to make, thus expensive. They did use boards in houses, mostly on interiors, paneling and such. When they did on occasion use them on exteriors, they never left the wood exposed to the elements because boards have a nasty habit of rotting very quickly. The stable has a stone half wall with a wood structure on top. The reason why you would use this building technique is weather, either wind or cold. The stable has a chimney, indicating cold is the concern. Thick stone walls are really good at keeping cold out and, more importantly, heat in. Then why would you have a wood structure on top of that is shown to be one board thick? As the boards weather and rot, there would become so many gaps between the boards, it would be impossible to keep the heat in. As I said, this structure makes zero sense. This is why these myths don't make sense, start to fall apart the moment you think about them for more than 2 minutes. Now, I've made my point, so I'm not going to keep harping on this, but it will come up a couple more times because this adherence to these philosophies and aesthetic choices starts to cause some major problems with the storytelling itself. We have weeds blocking the gate to the capital. This is just dumb. Once we're into the city proper, and we're back to really good. We have a mixture of ancient Rome, Renaissance Italy, and Victorian England. The buildings are influenced by Italian Renaissance palaces. The monuments and statues are a mixture of ancient Rome and Victorian sensibilities. A really nice touch at the center of these buildings are little courtyards, oftentimes with a well. One difference, the Italian palaces opened onto these courtyards. This is where they made a compromise for gameplay, because these courtyards are where the beggars live. Things get a little more complicated once you go inside the building. One of the oldest problems with video games, the interiors are often a lot larger than the exterior would lead you to believe. Another long-standing problem, the rooms are always too big with too much space in between the furniture and the other objects in the room. This is a sacrifice for gameplay. You need to be able to maneuver. At this point, it's become a convention. People accept it as is, so no big deal. Now, as far as architecture goes, these are supposed to be the homes of the wealthy and powerful within the capital. These rooms are too cold and sterile, too monochrome. Now, part of the problem is these walls should not be bare stone. They should be plastered and again covered in bright paint. Having said all that, these interiors are fine. You still get the idea they're the homes of very wealthy people, and the structure, it's all good. The market district is based upon known examples of markets in ancient Rome, which influenced Italian Renaissance markets, which later influenced Victorian galleries. The city's arena is very clearly influenced by the Roman Colosseum. Now, I want to point one thing out real quick. The wood used in building that Colosseum isn't weathered. One of the things that I really appreciate are these colonnades. Again, based upon historic examples. When the Colosseum is open for business, these would be full of people hawking all sorts of stuff, adding to the general spectacle and excitement of it all. Parks are as old as cities, so it would make sense that Imperial City would have its own park district. The Arboretum is the most Victorian of all the districts. The Imperial City's temple is clearly inspired by Rome's Pantheon, but it also has the look of a Victorian interpretation of the Pantheon. The Imperial Palace is where all the hard work that went into the world building, particularly within the Imperial City, pays off. The rest of the architecture has been based off of enough of a real-world example that when we encounter something, the palace, that is very clearly not of this world, we as gamers are willing to suspend our disbelief and accept it as is. Overall, I give Imperial City an A- to an A. It gets enough right, and when it does get right, it does so well that it's believable as a city. It's believable as an Imperial City. So, well done. If y'all follow the main quest, very early on you'll be taken to Waynon Priory, where you have, again, a mixture of really good and really bad. The main building is based upon a known Tudor building type. Again, really good. The thatched roof has been replaced with a more solid roof, indicating the building is of a higher status. This building, along with the inn right outside the gates of Imperial City, we're starting to establish a regional style that gives Central Cyrodiil its distinctive character. The developers do another very good thing that adds to immersion. They don't just give us one building and say, hey, here's your monastery. They give us a whole complex that is very typical of what you would have found in monasteries all over Europe. Off to the left, you have one of those little Irish-style cottages, a place for travelers to stay. And to the right, you have the chapel. Going through the tunnel under the building, you come out on the other side and you find a stable and a sheep's pen. You have an entire working monastery. Going back to the front of the monastery, we now have to address the mad, starting with the developer's insistence on portraying these buildings as dilapidated, falling apart, abandoned dumps covered in weeds and moss. This aesthetic choice is causing a bigger problem than just perpetuating a false myth. It's undermining world building. This monastery is run by a very powerful and wealthy religious order that just so happens to be the cover organization for the Emperor's bodyguards. And they don't have the time and resources to maintain their monastery? That might cause people to ask questions. Getting past the mess, there's a bigger architectural problem going on here. And it has everything to do with this arch. This tunnel through the ground floor of the building. There's nothing wrong with the tunnel in of itself. As I said earlier, the manor house, tunnel and all, is based upon known Tudor examples. The problem is architectural. What purpose does the tunnel serve? In a building like this, there would be two reasons to have a tunnel. One, the building's a gatehouse, standing in front of a much larger, more formal building. Or two, the manor house is the remnants of a much larger building with an interior courtyard which the tunnel allows access to. The problem with all of this is the chapel. Y'all will notice they're on two completely different orientations. They have nothing to do with each other. This indicates that either the chapel was here first and then the manor house was built later, or vice versa. Regardless of which building came first, if the manor house is a gatehouse, you would have wanted to put the larger house closer to the chapel. The gatehouse is in the wrong spot. If the manor house is the remnants of a much larger building, it's too close to the chapel, which again means it's in the wrong spot. There's a very easy solution to this problem. Get rid of the tunnel. And here's another thing to think about. Just looking at the building as is, what purpose does that tunnel serve? What benefit do you get being able to go through the building instead of just walking around the edge? You save what, 5-6 steps? The chapel is another example of really good design. It's a miniature version of cathedrals you'll find in cities all throughout Cyrodiil. It's inspired by English Renaissance interpretations of Gothic architecture. Think Christopher Wren. And seeing how Christopher Wren is one of my favorite architects, I'm going to say pretty dang good. Not long after you leave Waynon Priory and you have a few other adventures, you will soon find yourself at Cloud Ruler Temple, the Blade's secret fortress up in the mountains. The design is really well done, beautiful even, a blending of samurai castles from feudal Japan and European influences. The storyline tells us that a few warriors can defend this castle against an invading army. And the design is believable. It looks like a few warriors could defend this castle against an invading army. Here's where the designer's philosophical and aesthetic choices have come back to bite them in the rear end when it comes to world building. Y'all will notice Cloud Ruler Temple is in good condition. It's been maintained. So, we're supposed to believe that the Blades kept their secret fortress in the mountains that no one knew anything about in pristine condition, but they couldn't be bothered to maintain their monastery right outside a major city? How does that work? The Blades were so busy with their super secret Emperor bodyguard work, they didn't have time to do the maintenance on Waynon Priory themselves. And apparently, they couldn't be bothered to spend the money to pay somebody else to do the maintenance. But somehow at the same time, the Blades are doing maintenance on Cloud Ruler Temple, or they're hiring workers to come do maintenance on their super secret fortress in the mountains that no one's supposed to know anything about. Oh, that's not a security concern at all. The more you think about this, the less sense it makes. If everything is the same, nothing is unique. The city of Breville is a slum bordering on the shantytown, with the majority of the architecture so dilapidated it's at the point of collapse. However, because the developers insisted on portraying all the architecture outside of Imperial City and Cloud Ruler Temple as being dilapidated to the point of collapse, Breville loses its impact. Because of the developers' adherence to a particular philosophy and aesthetic choice, they've given up architecture's ability to communicate, to tell stories. They've given up important world building. For somebody who claims to love Oblivion, I'm being awful hard on it. Well, there's two reasons for that. First, you should be the hardest on the things you love the most. Second, it's part of my architectural training. If I want to hear how great my work is, I'll ask my mom. But if I want to improve, I'll ask somebody who'll be honest with me, who will point out every mistake and flaw. I've barely scratched the surface. This video is the equivalent of a 50,000-foot overview of some of the highlights of Cyrodiil's architecture. If you would like to hear me do more analysis of Oblivion's architecture, let me know down in the comments below. At any rate, I hope I've given you all something to think about, and until next time, y'all be safe. If y'all are still here, thank you very much. I really appreciate it. While you're at it, why don't you like this video, subscribe to the channel, click that notification bell. You can hear me yammer on about something else next time. And feel free to share this video far and wide.
Please like and subscribe. Please leave a comment.